Hey everyone, this is your broker Zach. So today I wanted to go over the 2022 contract changes. So there have been some updates to the TAR forms, and I wanted to go ahead because I took a broker only class and an attorney went over the different changes. I wanted to make a video for you. That way you're aware of the changes. We're going to go ahead and upload the new forms and updated forms into dotloop. So by the time you watch this, we'll already begin the process and you're fully aware of the different changes. So I'm going to go through this PDF document as quickly as I can. It is 117 pages, but like I said, I'm going to go through quick. A lot of it is just duplicate information. The biggest thing to note is you're going to see sections that are red, and that just means they've been deleted from the current TAR forms. And then blue text means it's an addition. So I'll show you what I mean, but here are the different changes. So to start, there's two new forms. One is a co-listing agreement between two firms, and it's exactly what it sounds like. So it's a listing agreement where two firms are listing the same property. So maybe one of our agents needs to partner with a commercial agent from a different brokerage or something like that. That's where you'd use that form. The other one is going to be a minimum appraised value contingency addendum. So I'll go over what that is, and then here's some different form changes. I'll upload this into Thinkific. That way, in case you ever need to reference this, you can. So let's go through here. TAR form changes for 2022. So this is the co-listing agreement between two firms. This is just saying if one brokerage is the listing company, they can bring in a co-listing brokerage, and it could be a totally separate company. So different ways to partner up with different agents, and you would use this form. And here is another one. So here's the minimum appraised value contingency addendum. So basically on our purchase and sale agreement where it has that addendum contingency or appraised contingency, this would add to that. So this is just saying it has to at least appraise for this value. So maybe your purchase price is 400,000 and they just say, hey, as long as it appraises for 300,000, I'm okay proceeding forward. So read this, and then it's kind of the same setup. Once they are notified of the value, buyer shall then have 3 days to either waive the appraisal contingency via the notification form or terminate this agreement. So different ways, different things to add to your contracts. Now moving on to the exclusive buyer representation agreement. What they've noticed is for VA loans, for example, in the MLS, sometimes a buyer or a listing agent would offer 2.5%, and then a buyer's agent would have this agreement saying I would make 3%, and they would charge their client the difference. Well, VA loans, sometimes they don't allow that. So what has been added to this, you see in the blue, is it's saying if a fee is not offered or paid to the broker, as could occur, for example, in the purchase of an unlisted property, client agrees to pay broker a total of blank or blank percent compensation based on the total sales price. In the event the buyer broker compensation herein is considered a non-allowable pursuant to VA guidelines and thus cannot be paid by buyer, this obligation is waived by broker. So just be aware that if you're working with a VA buyer, whatever is listed on the MLS, or if it's a for sale by owner, you have to negotiate something with the listing side. Otherwise, you might end up working for free with this clause if it's a VA buyer. And say it's a for sale by owner, they don't want to pay any commission. Normally you charge your client the commission. Well, if they're VA, that might not happen. So just be aware of that. And then that's the only change to the buyer's agreement. And they did it to every type of buyer's agreement. So exclusive buyer representation agreement. The only change again is that same VA non-allowable clause. Same with non-exclusive buyer representation agreement, added it here. That's the only change on the buyer rep forms. Non-exclusive buyer representation agreement. Here it is. Okay, and then they cleaned up it used to be called the listing agency mutual release agreement. But what TAR has clarified is this is meant for both listing agreements and buyer representation agreements. So if your client ever wants to cancel their agreement, then this is the form they would use. And they just made this more to be well-rounded for listing agreements or buyer rep agreements. So you can see here, whereas the client, customer, and firm company has entered into a listing/buyer representation agreement with an effective date of here. And then they would check one. So check listing agreement in conjunction with the aforementioned client and firm company is hereby mutually canceled, or buyer representation agreement between the aforementioned client and firm company is hereby mutually canceled. And then this really, they just deleted it here, this paragraph, and then put it here with just some cleaner language. But basically, this is your carryover clause. So for example, if you're representing a buyer, you show them a home they love, then they cancel on you the next day, you might still be entitled to compensation with this paragraph. So go ahead and just read this, make sure you're aware of it, but they've kind of just cleaned up this form. Disclaimer notice, this has been updated on the last page right here, reliance. So it says, you understanding that it is your responsibility, and this is talking to your client, customer, you understand that it is your responsibility to determine whether the size, location, and condition of the property are acceptable prior to submitting an offer on a property. So they got rid of signing a contract and they changed it instead that your customer client should be aware to determine these things prior to submitting an offer on a property. That's the only change there. Purchase and sale agreement. So here is where they've made a couple different changes. And I actually like them. I think it helps clean up the contract a little bit, less gray area. So one is on the loan type. This loan shall be the type selected below. Select the appropriate box. So they got rid of boxes because some people were checking VA and FHA, or they're checking multiple boxes. You just check one. And then they got rid of this item too. Unselected items will not be part of this agreement. They got rid of that because right here, the buyer is allowed to apply for any different loan type or term as long as it doesn't increase the seller's costs. So they got rid of this. So you just check one box and then the buyer does have the right. They can change at any time to a different loan if they want. That's the one change. This was just to make more clarity. So they just capitalized agreement, basically because when you capitalize it, it's reinforcing that it's this agreement we're talking about, not just any agreement. So the capitalized agreement, seller, money, trust money. So those are some clerical changes. This is going to be the big change. So public water or public sewer systems. So normally we found this on an FHA VA addendum. Now this just applies to everything because there's a lot of municipalities and counties and cities that are expanding. And for those of you that don't know, what they're requiring is if you have a septic system, sometimes it's grandfathered in, whatever else, upon the home closing or transferring ownership, that city or municipality is requiring that septic system. They're requiring you to now hook up to a sewer system. So this now applies to everything, not just VA and FHA. So I'll go ahead and read this. Public water or public sewer systems. In the event it is discovered that public water or public sewer system is accessible to the property and connection to the property is required by a governmental agency, authority, or lender, buyer shall promptly notify the seller via the notification form or equivalent written notice. Seller and buyer shall have 5 days following such written notice, but not later than the closing date, to negotiate in good faith the payment for the cost and the connection to the public water or public sewer system. In the event seller and buyer do not reach a mutual written agreement for the payment of such cost or a mutually agreeable written extension of such time period, as evidenced in an amendment to this agreement signed by both parties within such period of time, this agreement is hereby terminated. If terminated, the buyer is entitled to a refund of the earnest money, trust money. So this paragraph that's been added, this goes outside the inspection period. So let's say you have a 10-day inspection period and you get past that, but you're still before closing. And let's say day 25 of the contract, you discover, hey, we got to connect to a sewer system. This clause still comes into effect. So it doesn't just apply during your inspection period. It applies at any point during the contract. And the reason they did that is sometimes you just don't know. So sometimes it takes longer for title company to do a search or a lien search, or a lender or appraiser, somebody to discover that, hey, this house has to be connected to a public sewer system. So this applies at any point during the contract. If it's found out, you now have 5 days, not later than the closing date, to negotiate in good faith, hey, who's going to pay this? And it's fully negotiable. So it's not on the responsibility of the seller, not responsible for the buyer. They just have to act in good faith to try and negotiate who's going to pay for it. And if they can't, then it's going to be terminated. This contract will, after those 5 days. So just be aware of that. That's the biggest change. They put this as number 6, so they just updated the paragraph numbers for all these. Again, they just updated the numbers. Okay, here's the second biggest change. So under the buyer's inspection and resolution period, a lot of real estate agents were in special stipulations doing inspections on a pass-fail basis. However, they were writing all sorts of craziness in the special stipulations, leading to a lot of different interpretations, different liability. So they basically created a pass-fail checkbox for the inspections. So right now, buyer's inspection and resolution, within blank days after the binding agreement date, buyer shall cause to be conducted any inspection provided for herein. So we know this one. Well, what you can do is you can have this inspection period, and then you can also check this box down here. So buyer waives the option to request items to be repaired and or replaced under D3 above, and there shall be no resolution period. Buyer retains the right to perform buyer's inspections and to timely furnish seller with a list of written specified objections and immediately terminate this agreement as provided in D1, or accept the property in its present as is condition as provided under D2. So again, this is creating a pass-fail paragraph. So it removes a resolution period. And now, like if I put 10 days in here, I have 10 days to decide, do I want this property or not? So kind of cool to add that. Helps protect real estate agents so we're not practicing law and special stips. And then the second update they did with the inspections. So if you do choose to have a resolution period, seller and buyer shall have a period of blank days following receipt of the above stated written list, which is the resolution period, to reach a mutual agreement as to the items to be repaired or replaced with like quality or value by seller. So what happened was, there's actually a lawsuit out right now. A buyer made a request for repairs. The seller said, no, I'm not going to do that. And the seller said, and the buyer went back and said, okay, fine, I'll take it as is. I agree to your no, I'm not going to do anything. Well, the seller came back and said, actually, no, we didn't agree to anything. I chose not to do anything. And so they were suing the buyer. So what this is clarifying, and what TAR meant all along, they're just clarifying it, is the buyer retains the ability to accept the property in its present as is condition during the resolution period. So if they're mutually trying to agree to repairs, nothing can be made. The seller just can't say, oh yeah, we didn't come to agreement. The buyer can still say, no, I still take it as is. So that is an option during the resolution period. They're just clearing that up. So biggest updates, I do like this paragraph. I think it'll help more as is. Kind of makes it closer to the Florida contract that I was using. So 9, 10, 11, they're just updating the numbers here. They just took out these. Performance deadline still means the same. Let's see, clerical update, and that's it. So those are the most relevant updates a lot of you are going to be using for the purchase and sale agreement. So as is, public water, and then during a resolution period, they can take it as is. Moving on to the next form, new construction purchase and sale agreement. Again, just clerical, they're just updating these. I think that was it for this one. Again, they just got rid of that. It's just check a box, single box. That's that one. Lot, land, and purchase sale agreement. Again, clerical updates. Mutual release. Okay, so mutual release of purchase and sale agreement and disbursement of earnest money, trust money. So what they did here is, one, they said, if applicable, buyer have provided seller with all required documentation which supports buyer's right to terminate pursuant to any specified buyer's contingency contained within this agreement. So basically what they're saying is, if the buyer is canceling this agreement, then the buyers have provided sellers with all required documentation which supports buyer's right to terminate. So not just a seller requesting anything out of the blue moon that they want to see why the buyer canceled, but just required documentation is what the buyer can provide. And then down here, they put earnest money, trust money is being dispersed as follows. If you put return to buyer, you now have a checkbox for appraisal contingencies. So they've added that one. Next agreement, amendment to the listing agreement. They added a checkbox for marketing of property commencement date changed to blank. So if you need to change when the property is going to be having marketing done, you just add the new date here. Everybody sign. Backup agreement contingency addendum. They reworded this sentence and instead created, in the event that the primary agreement is terminated or becomes null and void, seller or seller's representative shall deliver to buyer or buyer's representative within notice, at which time the contingency provided in this addendum is satisfied and this agreement shall move into a primary position. The date buyer or buyer's representatives receives the written notice that the primary agreement has been terminated or is null and void will serve as the start date for all time periods specified in agreements or in days in this agreement. So basically it's saying that's your bound agreement date is what they've clarified. VA FHA loan addendum. This will probably be the form you use the second most besides purchase and sale. What they did is, because they added that public water or public sewer system clause in the contract, they got rid of all this confusing wording here, and they just instead put see public water or public sewer system section in purchase and sale agreement. So that definitely clears this up, makes it a lot more cleaner, and it just means everybody has to mutually work together. And then here under non-allowables, they put, a lot of realtors were just leaving this blank. Well, now they put shall be deemed to be 0 if left blank. So just something to be aware of. If you intend to put a price here, put something here, but don't, if you leave it blank, it just becomes 0 now. And then the last couple are investment and commercial properties. So I'll just kind of breeze through this real quick. But investment property addendum, they added a checkbox for properties used as short-term rentals. This agreement is contingent upon buyer's receipt, review, inspection, and approval of accounting statements for the past blank months showing occupancy rate, average nightly rental rate, and any applicable fees and taxes. So they added that for short-term rentals because those are taking off. Our notification form, which we love, at the very end, they added a checkbox for backup agreement contingencies only. Seller hereby notifies buyer that the primary agreement has been terminated or is null and void. Buyer's backup agreement has moved into primary position. So that's now on the notification form. Additional contract language. Let's see, they added that co-listing agreement is now here. Clerical updates on this form. Commercial. They added this form. Sublease listing addendum to the commercial open listing agreement for lease. Commercial exclusive leasing agreement. They've clarified this is not a property management agreement. It's the only change on that form. Commercial purchase and sale agreement. They've updated this to make it more like the purchase and sale agreement for residential properties. This transaction shall be consummated or at such other time on blank, or at such other time the parties may agree upon in writing. Closing agency for buyer, closing agency for seller. So they added those. So the change there. Commercial lot and land, same thing. Closing agency for buyer, closing agency for seller. And that's it. So that's the form updates for 2022. We'll definitely probably be using the purchase and sale agreement changes the most. The VA FHA addendum probably second most, but those are the updates. Again, we're going to be adding these to Dot Loop to help you guys out. So there won't be any downtime, but you'll be noticing the changes. And I just want you guys to be aware. And I hope you guys all have a successful 2022. I'll talk to you later.